Hey, welcome to Select Arcane. Last time we left off with a KC's Galloping gal who ended up getting a new hairdo. I went through the steps and processes how to give her new viscose hair from scratch. And now we're turning our attention to the face up. Prepare your magnifying glasses and your tiniest brushes, cat whiskers included. This is going to be some high detail work. Assuming that you've already ripped all the hair out of the head and have the new hair on your doll, it's time to take that face off. You can use nail polish remover, but I highly recommend using 100% acetone and a Q-tip. It's just a lot faster and easier and saves yourself the trouble. One swipe and her eyebrows are gone. Use some soap and wash off that acetone off of her face. Acetone can actually damage and melt the vinyl over time, so you want to wash all that off. After you do, she'll be completely safe, don't worry. To begin painting the face, you need to get the hair out of the way first. My favorite method is to twist the hair out of the way and use a standard rubber glove as the masking. I use sewing pins to pin the glove to her head using her existing head holes until she looks like a Christian idol. I like using a twist tie, but in this case a really malleable piece of wire to pin the rest of the hair out of the way. And now she's all ready for spraying. I'm using Mr. Super Clear as her sealant. This will provide some texture for the pencils and paint to stick to when we start working on her face. I just want to point out that I find MSC quite unreliable, but in the case of vinyl doll faces, it works quite well even in my humidity. I take her out into the dark and spray her. Man, I really have to get this light fixed. I choose to leave her overnight to cure so that I can work on her face the next day. Again, I find MSC quite volatile, so I just like to leave it and let it settle. My material list includes watercolor pencils, hard pastels, and gouache paint. If you've watched my previous doll making videos, you've probably noticed that I lean very heavily on the gouache. But I've grown as an artist since then, and now I lean really into the watercolor pencils and pastels for the most part. I find they're more scalable at this tiny size. I start first by finding a basic face reference, because even though these dolls have great facial sculpting, it's really nice to have some sort of reference to go off of. In this case, I'm going to be using a young Winona Ryder as my reference. I'm not necessarily making her, but rather using the reference as a map for where I'm going on the face. I start off with the watercolor pencils, making a very basic sketch. I like starting with the eyebrows because I find that anchors the face, and it helps me plan where I'm going. You need a steady hand for this, but don't worry, watercolor pencils wipe off with just a little bit of water and a Q-tip. You can start over as many times as you want. Once I'm satisfied with redoing the brows 3 times, I go to the lips. I'm going to be adding a little bit of lipstick in this case rather than my usual blushing, so I go in with a bright red. Again, it's watercolor pencils, you can mess up as many times as you want. You'll notice that everything's not very pigmented and not very detailed at this point, and that's because we're only on the first layer. We're going to build up our layers to get a level of realism and to get a layer of depth and color. Next I move over to the pastels. In this case I'm using Mungyo hard pastels from Korea, which I find are a really good brand for this because they're really pigmented. I use a relatively harder round brush, and I scrub the color I want and then gently apply it to the doll because a little goes a long way. I start with some basic blushing on the cheeks and then move over to a darker color that's darker than her skin tone for a bit of contour and shading. Because I don't know what I want her to wear yet, I'm going along the collarbones as well to add some definition, just in case she wears something like a tank top. I also start to block in her eye makeup. Again, I'm going with a more made up look in this case. Taking some of the pastel on a small brush, I scrape inside of her eye to deposit some pigment. I go back in with the watercolor pencils to start building up her eye inside of her face. Oh man, why did I write it like this? It's so weird. Once the face is no longer taking any more pigment, that means it's time to spray again. Go out, use your Mr. Super Clear, and wait a few hours for it to cure. You're going to notice the face is suddenly more pigmented even though you really haven't done anything yet, and now you can go in with your next layer. All of the progress that you've already made has been saved by that sealant. So even if you add water to the face to wipe away a new mistake, the previous work is already saved like a Photoshop file. I go back in with those watercolor pencils to start building up those brows, lips, and eyes again. I also use the water to my advantage and wet a little bit of black inside of the lip area to blend in a little bit of shadows into the lip crease, and that will add a little bit of realism. Remember, you can add freckles, beauty marks, tattoos, whatever you want. Watercolor pencils will do it. I find this method, for me, is a lot more reliable and easier than just using the gouache, which I feel can get a little bit heavy-handed. And you can of course use acrylic paints, but it does raise up when you apply it to the doll's face, and it can get out of scale very quickly. On this layer, I really focus on the eyes, building up the sclera, or the whites of the eyes, the iris, which is the colored part, and the makeup. I'm giving her brown eyes just like Winona. And when I'm happy, I go and spray again. While not directly face-up related, it is related. If you want to draw your tattoos on, use a watercolor pencil to sketch them out. A black will virtually come out the same as regular black ink on a tattoo. And of course, go crazy with the colors. There's colored tattoos all over the world. If you mess up, just wipe off with some water. And then follow up by spraying with Mr. Superclear. Here I added a coffee cup that says Good Magic, and also a thigh tattoo with a girl in a martini glass. Any guesses as to what this doll is going to be doing? I finished her off with a mani-pedi, red of course to match her hair and her lips. And the absolute last thing to do is to gloss the eyes with high gloss varnish. I'm using Liquitex brand. Apply the gloss anywhere where you want it to be shiny and protected. And now let's unwrap her hair. This is going to be the first time we see her with face and hair together. I'm so happy with how this turned out. Her eyebrows feel a little bit light for her face in my opinion, but at the same time it looks like she's a naturally light brunette who just dyed her hair black and red. She's technically all done but needs an outfit, which I'm not going to make a tutorial on. If you've seen my past videos, you know my sewing skills are horrific. But you will catch her in a future video. Maybe something performance related? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram @SelectArcane or on Facebook by the same name. I hope you found this tutorial really enjoyable and got something out of it. See you next time. Bye!